And on today's live video, I'm just honestly going to plant the tomatoes that are behind me and you guys can watch. So I'm gonna head over and just show you about how I go about my daily garden tasks. It is incredibly windy here, so if you see my plants like bending from gale force winds, that is why. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up, and then of course drop your comments down below. And then when I'm done planting this bed, which I expect to take about 15-ish minutes, I will come head over back to you guys and then start answering your questions. So I'm gonna go behind the flower bed. I'm gonna angle this camera down so you guys can see what I'm doing. And I'm just gonna go through the whole process of getting this entire tomato bed planted. So I do have corn at the very back, but other than that, it's straight tomatoes. Okay, so I just filmed a video about how to plant tomatoes versus corn, and I understand that this is not an ideal companion planting situation, but if you watch my companion planting video, so long as you're feeding both of these heavy feeders, you will be a-okay. I don't see any issues with it, so you will be fine. Yeah, I have a ton of tomatoes here today, and like a lot of tomatoes that I have to plant. And some of them, I thought I had blight, but I had some other type of bacterial infection, and I actually treated them. So they came back, they're doing fine. However, I'm expecting the transplant shock to set in heavy on these. So I'm actually going to be fertilizing with a calcium and phosphate fertilizer, because the calcium and the phosphate combined as one will actually help reduce the transplant shock. So phosphate, if you guys didn't know, is basically the stress nutrient, and then calcium also is a stress nutrient. So if a plant is under any sort of stress, whether that be mechanical or bug infestation or root, calcium is what is sent out by the plant's basically immune system. And so the calcium is also key in this. So I'm using the organic Evolve Dirt and Grow Calcium Essentials plant fertilizer, because it is calcium and literally just phosphate, which are the two things I most definitely need to reduce the transplant in already sick tomatoes. But my other tomato flower bed, those tomatoes aren't nearly as bad. Now, I don't know if it's because I did different tomatoes with this one. I did basically unique different varieties. The ones that didn't get the blight or didn't get the bacterial infection were simply just like a beefsteak tomato. So I don't know if that makes a difference. These are a bit more sunburst or something, and then there's like a cotton candy one, and I think it's all named after more so the color of the tomato plant that, or the tomato fruit that it gives us, is more so what the reasoning for that is. So when I go to do these, I do pluck off any suckers if there are any, but while they were indoors, I was pretty keen on cleaning them up and making sure that they didn't end up with too many suckers, so I stay on top of that as they're little babies. But yeah, and then this flower bed is going to be, or this tomato bed is going to be my organic tomato bed this year. So I'm not putting any conventional fertilizers in here. I'm using Evolve Dirt and Grow. I'm using Earth Medicine, which I talked about in other videos before as well. And then I'm also using the ketonic in this bed. And then the bed directly beside it is going to be conventional fertilizers mostly. And then we'll compare the two and see pound for pound how many more tomatoes we get out of each one. My dogs dig holes more than I dig holes, I think. something really crazy about this soil. So I've been working on this soil for years now. It's still relatively young and new, but the crazy thing about this soil is that I have been adding organic materials to it, and I was digging today and I found an earthworm, and this is on top of brick. So don't know where he came from. Obviously out of some sort of soil amendment that I added. But yeah. So when I put these in here, I do have root-bound plants. I don't muddle with the roots at all. When you're transplanting outside, the less root damage you do, the better. You're already gonna have transplant shock because of root stress, and fiddling with the roots is just gonna make it that much worse. So I do avoid that. And then I actually don't do root placed fertilizer, because fertilizer generally is water soluble, meaning that when it rains, it pushes it farther down into the soil profile and then eventually out of the soil profile, in this case because it's on top of a brick base. So I will fertilize by top dressing in this case, or in most cases. So I don't do placed fertilizer. And then the other reason why I don't do root placed fertilizer is because it doesn't make your plant work. So your plant's not going to try to dig down deep to find nutrients. Your plant isn't going to try to expand its roots reach, because everything's right where it needs to be, right? So why would you go on an adventure if the adventure's right at your front door? So I do plant these pretty heavy. You can space them out more if you want, but I really pack my tomatoes in. We eat a lot of pasta sauce in our house, so it's a must-do here. In a no-dig scenario, you technically would just lay these out and then pile up the dirt around them and make kind of like a mound, which really doesn't make that much of a difference in how you would go about doing this. But this guy split in the middle. That's bizarre. That's bizarre. So I'm going to put these in here, and the advantageous roots will make new roots, not the hairs. The hairs are not roots. That is a gardening myth. I don't know why people keep on saying that. There was a few, even just recently, big YouTubers too, like Callie Kim and a few that were like, yeah, those root hairs, they turn into roots. No, they don't. And I had a friend asking, how do you prove that those don't turn into roots? Like, how do you know that these influencers are wrong? And I told her that no university is going to fund a study as to whether or not trichomes turn into roots, because plant scientists and agronomists and food scientists already know trichomes don't turn into roots. Trichomes have very specific jobs unrelated to nutrient capture, and those jobs would include attracting certain bugs that they need to pollinate into the area. It would include deterring pests that could harm the plant through scents. So that's what things like marigolds and tomatoes will do. Or they're there to actually protect the plant from too much sunlight or from too much wind or heat loss, evaporation. So that's more so the purpose of them. And for tomatoes, obviously they're for the scent, they're glandular in most cases, but for some cases it's just to deter a pest from trying to munch on the actual plant. So that's why there's no studies to debunk the fact that trichomes aren't roots, is because I think a university would literally take away your degree if you even ask that question. It's just not debated. It is debated in the gardening world, but I think it's debated in the gardening world because they don't know they haven't done plant science, right? They've just observed what they've seen for a plant and not looked, or they obviously don't have the tools to be able to study what those trichomes do, because you need special equipment or special setup to be able to see what happens to those roots underneath the soil. So, and that's just not an everyday person thing. So debunk the rumor. I think I just launched shorts today talking about that. So see, I told you guys this wouldn't even take that long. Okay, I'm gonna see what questions you guys have, and then I gotta get some buckets on these guys. So actually I have a bucket over there. I'll show you what I do. I'll just do one for you guys so you can see. I only do it for hi. I gotta plug this back in. So I'll show you how I do the buckets on the plants. I do that to protect them from obviously transplant shock and the wind, the sun, that sort of thing. So I did harden them off, but sometimes plants still freak out despite the fact that we have hardened them off properly. So what I do is I will put a bucket on top, and I only leave it on top for 3 days if conditions are ideal. But if I know it's gonna get super cold or super hot or windy or whatever the case is, then I will actually leave it on for about a week. So I'm just gonna go grab that bucket. Okay, so this is my bucket, and you can see it has a hole in it, obviously. So not functional any longer, but anything will work. So coffee tins will work, even just pieces of plywood, if you could cut them in a format where you just hammer them into the ground. So I literally take this bucket and I just place it over top of the plant. I'm not gonna do that one because I can't do that one with one hand, but that's it. Done. And then I will obviously water and fertilize through there and all that fun stuff. So yeah, I'm gonna just move us over here, and then I'm going to jump into the comment section, and then I'm gonna get back to planting without you guys because I'm not that talented. Ooh. I just gotta get out of the sun because I can't see the phone 110%. Okay, let's jump in the greenhouse where I don't have much left in it. I'm almost done. I'm excited to almost be done. I have some pepper plants in here, some cannabis, and then just flowers mostly. And some of the stuff I'll leave in here for probably till the end of June. It's still supposed to get like really cold here where we are. So I'm hoping, I don't know. I'm hoping it's all done. Happy to see you live. Happy to see you here, Tech Crouch. Have you ever heard of cracked egg in the planting hole, then plant the tomato methods? Yes. Okay, so I'll see if I can find that still. So if you guys don't follow me on Instagram, you wouldn't know this. But last year, if you've been on this channel long enough, you know that I put tomatoes and bananas and coffee grounds placed in the hole with the tomato plant to see if it would degrade, and it doesn't degrade in Canada. It is way too cold here. Now, given I'm in a zone 3, so in a zone 5 or something, it may be slightly different, but here it is not so much. So I'm just gonna see if I can find them still, but I had them. So the reason why this bed is taken apart is because I'm moving it somewhere else, but I have pieces of eggshells left over from last year's experience because they didn't decompose, and they're not going to decompose for many, many moons because it's just simply too cold here, and it just doesn't happen fast enough. So it won't be bioavailable. Now, if you put it in a compost where a compost can get a little bit warmer and that sort of thing, then you'd be much better off, and you actually would get the benefits of that calcium, which again would help with the transplant shock that I was talking about before. So adding calcium to your compost is a great idea. Now, another thing to note about the compost, you guys, or about the calcium, is that calcium and magnesium very rarely are deficient in Canada or in North America for that matter. Our soils are considered young soils, meaning that the glacier receded at a time when wasn't too long ago in the scope of the world. So because we have a young soil, we actually have quite a bit of calcium and magnesium mixed up into the soil profile. And the only restricting factor of that compost, or of that calcium and magnesium being released, is the soil pH. So if our soil pH isn't in that realm of 5.6 to 6, it's a bit wider than that, but if it's not in that wheelhouse, that's when we end up with nutrient deficiency issues. So that's more so your calcium issue. If you're noticing it, test your pH, start there, and then begin to think about actually adding calcium into the system. So if you read about calcium in general and when it's added in a food production format, so a lot of the research studies that I get data for you guys on doesn't come from gardeners or garden scientists, I guess you could say. It comes from food scientists, so crop scientists. So people who are trying to make food to feed the population. That's where a majority of the money goes into, and the research and the data is crunched in, is in food production specifically. So when you look at calcium being added in a food production standpoint, so if you're producing really heavy feeder crops such as maybe corn, tomatoes, that sort of thing, that's where you see, if it's not rotated or the soil system isn't managed properly, that's when you can run into calcium deficient soils. The chances of a home gardener having calcium deficient soils in North America is relatively low. We're talking like southern US and 2 cropping systems. So we crop, we harvest, and then we put another crop in right away. So no breaks in between, that sort of thing. Okay. Hi, Jen. We had a freak cold snap, went to 3 degrees Celsius. My tomatoes have been in the ground almost 2 weeks in some of the branches. Oh no. Okay, so Jen, the good news is that it only went to +3. So that means that it's unlikely to be severe frost damage. It's most likely a shock response. So your plant will bounce back. Now, if you would have said it went to -3, then I would say maybe unlikely. You should see the extent of the damage within the first 48 to 72 hours. Whatever's left or remaining after that 48 to 72 hours, that is what you are stuck with for the rest of the year, waiting for them to bounce back. You may have a later harvest, you may have a smaller plant. Overall, your plant will be just fine. So I think you will be okay there. As a insurance policy, you might want to plant some more, but yeah, zone 5 eggshells take years to degrade. That was my dog. Yeah, so that's kind of what I thought. Oh, my dogs are wanting to come in. The door's only so big and my camera's taking up a vast majority of that space, so you can't come in. Yeah, so that's the other thing too, is baking the actual baking the eggshells will also help crushing them down. So, but I'm going to let you guys go. We've been on here for 20 minutes. Thanks so much for joining in, and happy planting. Hopefully it gets warmer in Ontario. I know it was incredibly cold. I will talk to you guys next time. Bye. I don't even know how to exit this. Oh, is there? There we go.